I want to speak to those carrying the weight of a broken heart. Life can be overwhelming when trust is shattered, dreams feel distant, and hope seems out of reach. But in these moments of pain, there's a source of strength greater than any heartbreak God. Trusting Him doesn't erase the pain instantly, but it brings healing, purpose, and peace beyond understanding. God sees your tears, knows your struggles, and promises to turn your pain into something beautiful. So as we journey through this topic, let's open our hearts to trust Him fully, even in our brokenness. When your heart is broken, it feels like the world stops turning. The colors of life fade, the joy in everyday moments disappears, and you're left wondering how something so heavy can be carried in such a fragile frame. Heartbreak isn't just an emotional wound, it's a deep, aching pain that reaches into your soul. It's the kind of hurt that keeps you up at night, staring at the ceiling, asking questions that have no answers. You replay moments in your mind, searching for the why and how, but the answers never come, leaving you with a weight that feels impossible to bear. You see, heartbreak doesn't just hurt because of what happened, it hurts because of what it represents. It's not just about the loss of a person, a dream, or a trust. It's about the shattering of something you held sacred. You placed your hopes, your energy, your belief in something or someone, and when it's taken away, it feels like a part of you goes missing too. It's overwhelming because it shakes the foundation of who you are. It forces you to question your worth, your choices, and even the path you're walking. And in those moments, it's hard not to feel lost. But let me tell you, feeling lost is part of the process. It's okay to feel that way because it means you care deeply. It means you gave a part of yourself, and that's not something to be ashamed of. The world might tell you to get over it or move on, but those words don't heal. They don't acknowledge the depth of what you're going through. Because the truth is, heartbreak isn't something you just get over, it's something you walk through. The reason it feels so overwhelming is because heartbreak touches every part of you, your mind, your body, and your spirit. It's in the way your chest tightens when a memory surfaces. It's in the way your appetite fades or your sleep becomes restless. It's in the way you find yourself pulling away from people because the idea of explaining your pain feels too exhausting. It's in the way your mind races with what ifs, and if only, creating a storm of emotions that leave you feeling drained. But here's the thing: that storm isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to cleanse you. Heartbreak forces you to face emotions you might have buried, fears you didn't even know you had, and truths you've avoided. It strips away the surface and reveals the raw, vulnerable parts of who you are. And while that vulnerability can feel like weakness, it's actually the beginning of your strength. Because when you're broken, that's when you're most open to growth. The overwhelming nature of heartbreak is also tied to the fact that we live in a world that teaches us to hide our pain. Society says, put on a brave face, don't let them see you cry, keep moving forward. But healing doesn't happen in silence. Healing happens when you confront the pain head on, when you allow yourself to feel every emotion, the anger, the sadness, the confusion. It's in those moments of honesty with yourself that you begin to understand the depth of what you're going through and the resilience that lies within you. Heartbreak is overwhelming because it disrupts your sense of control. We like to think we can plan our lives, that if we do everything right, things will work out. But heartbreak reminds us that life doesn't always go according to plan. It humbles us. It brings us to our knees, forcing us to confront our limitations. And in that place of humility, we have a choice. We can let the pain consume us, or we can choose to trust that there's a purpose in the pain. When you're in the midst of heartbreak, it's easy to feel like you're alone. The world around you keeps moving, and you wonder if anyone notices your struggle. But let me tell you something: your pain matters. It's valid. And while it might feel like no one understands, there's someone who does. The overwhelming nature of heartbreak is no match for the strength and love that's waiting for you if you're willing to trust. Because even in your darkest moments, you're not abandoned. You're being prepared for something greater. So yes, heartbreak is painful. It's messy. It's overwhelming. But it's also a part of life that shapes us in ways we can't always see in the moment. It teaches us about love, about resilience, and about the importance of placing our trust in something bigger than ourselves. And as you walk through this season of pain, remember that it's not the end of your story. It's a chapter, a necessary part of your journey, and it's leading you to a place of healing and purpose. Trust the process, even when it hurts. When your heart is heavy with pain, when the nights feel endless and the tears won't stop falling, there's something you need to hold on to: God's promise. You see, God doesn't promise a life without challenges. He doesn't promise that you won't face heartbreak or feel the sting of betrayal. But what he does promise is that he will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He will walk with you through the storm, guiding you, strengthening you, and carrying you when the weight becomes too much. Now let's talk about that. When you're in the middle of heartbreak, it's easy to feel abandoned, like no one sees your pain, like no one sees your pain, like no one cares. But let me tell you something powerful. God sees you. He knows every tear you've cried, every silent prayer you've whispered in the dead of night. And his promise is this: he is with you, right there in the middle of your pain. He's not watching from a distance, he's walking beside you, feeling your hurt, understanding your struggle, and working on your behalf even when you can't see it. There's a peace that comes from knowing God's promises. It's not the kind of peace the world offers, the kind that comes and goes with circumstances. No, this peace is steady, unshakable. It's the peace that says, even though my heart is broken, even though I don't understand why this is happening, I know God is still good. I know he has a plan. I know he's working all things together for my good. That's the promise you can cling to when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And let's be real, when you're hurting, it's hard to see the good in anything. It's hard to trust that there's a purpose in the pain. But that's where faith comes in. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's not about pretending the pain isn't real. Faith is about trusting in God's promises even when you can't see the outcome. It's about believing that he's working behind the scenes, orchestrating something beautiful out of your brokenness. You might be wondering, how can I trust God when my heart feels shattered? The answer lies in his track record. God has a history of turning pain into purpose, of using what was meant for harm to bring about good. Think about it. He took Joseph from a pit to a palace. He turned David's season of hiding into preparation for a throne. He transformed the cross, a symbol of pain and death, into the ultimate sign of victory and redemption. If he could do that, imagine what he can do with your heartbreak. God's promises are like anchors for your soul. When the waves of pain and doubt threaten to pull you under, his promises keep you steady. He promises to heal the brokenhearted, to bind up their wounds. He promises to give you beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for a spirit of despair. These aren't just words, they're truths you can hold on to. They're reminders that your pain is not permanent, that healing is on the horizon. But here's the thing about healing, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's okay. God doesn't rush your healing. He meets you where you are, in the mess of your emotions, in the depth of your despair. He walks with you, step by step, teaching you, shaping you, and reminding you that you are never alone. His presence is constant, his love unchanging, and his promises unbreakable. Heartbreak has a way of making you feel small, like your pain doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But let me tell you something, you matter to God. Your pain matters to him. He's not indifferent to your suffering. He's not ignoring your cries. He's right there with you, holding you, comforting you, and reminding you that you are his. And because you are his, he will not let this pain destroy you. He will use it to strengthen you, to refine you, and to prepare you for the blessings he has in store. There's a promise in the Bible that says God is close to the brokenhearted. Think about that for a moment. In your lowest, most painful moments, God is closer than ever. He's not just near, he's holding you, wrapping you in his love, and whispering, I'm here, I've got you. That's the kind of love that can heal any wound, the kind of love that can bring light to the darkest places. And let's not forget about hope. God's promises are full of hope. Hope that this pain won't last forever. Hope that better days are ahead. Hope that what you're going through now is not the end of your story. Hope is powerful because it shifts your focus from your pain to God's plan. It reminds you that no matter how broken you feel, God is still in control and he's still writing your story. So when your heart is broken, trust God's promises. Trust that he sees you, that he loves you, and that he's working all things for your good. Trust that he's turning your pain into purpose, your heartbreak into healing, and your tears into testimony. Because that's who he is, a God of redemption, a God of restoration, a God who keeps his promises. And his promise to you is this: you are not alone, you are deeply loved, and you are being held in the hands of the one who can heal your heart. Brokenness is not the end of your story. It may feel like it in the moment when your heart is heavy, when the pain seems unbearable, when the questions outnumber the answers. But there's something powerful about what God can do with brokenness. He doesn't just heal it, he transforms it. He takes the shattered pieces of your heart and turns them into a masterpiece of grace. And when you allow him to work, That brokenness becomes something more. It becomes a testimony of faith. Your story matters. The pain you've endured, the healing you've experienced, the lessons you've learned, they all have a purpose. God doesn't waste a single tear, a single moment of struggle. He uses it all, not just to shape you, but to encourage and inspire others. You see, your testimony is a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope for those who are still walking through their own storms. When you share your story, you're not just talking about what you've been through, you're showing others what God can do. Turning brokenness into a testimony starts with recognizing that your pain has a purpose. It's not just something to get through, it's something to grow through. It's an opportunity to experience God's faithfulness in a way that's deeply personal. And once you've experienced that, you can't keep it to yourself. You have to share it, because there's someone out there who needs to hear it. Someone who needs to know that healing is possible, that they're not alone, and that God is still in the business of redemption. When you share your testimony, you're not claiming to have all the answers. You're not saying that the journey was easy or that the pain disappeared overnight. What you're saying is that God was with you every step of the way. You're saying that His strength carried you when you couldn't carry yourself, that His love healed wounds you thought would never heal, and that His plan for your life is greater than anything you could have imagined. That's the power of a testimony. It points back to Him. Sharing your story requires vulnerability, and that can be scary. It means opening up about your struggles, your doubts, your fears. But in that vulnerability, there's strength. Because when you're honest about where you've been and what God has brought you through, it gives others permission to be honest too. It creates a connection, a space where people can see that they're not alone in their pain. And in that connection, healing begins. Your testimony doesn't have to be dramatic to be powerful. Sometimes, the most impactful stories are the ones that show God's faithfulness in the everyday moments. Maybe your testimony is about finding peace in the midst of chaos. Maybe it's about learning to forgive when it felt impossible. Maybe it's about trusting God's plan, even when it didn't make sense. Whatever your story is, it has the power to touch hearts and change lives. Because it's not just your story, it's God's story working through you. When you share your testimony, you're not just speaking words, you're planting seeds of hope. You're showing others that healing is possible, that God is faithful, and that there's purpose in the pain. You may never know the full impact of your story, but that's not for you to worry about. Your job is to share it and let God do the rest. He's the one who takes your words and uses them to touch hearts, to inspire faith, and to bring hope to the hurting. Turning brokenness into a testimony doesn't mean you ignore the pain or pretend it didn't happen. It means you acknowledge it, but you don't let it define you. It means you let God use it to show His power, His love, and His grace. It's about shifting the focus from what happened to what God did with it. It's about declaring that your story isn't about the pain, it's about the healing, the redemption, the transformation. Your testimony is a reminder that God is bigger than your brokenness. It's a declaration that what the enemy meant for harm, God used for good. It's a celebration of His faithfulness, His mercy, and His your brokenness is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a powerful testimony. What once felt like defeat can become a story of hope and redemption, shining light into the lives of others. When you let God transform your pain, He uses it for a greater purpose. Your journey, your healing, your faith, they inspire and encourage those still searching for hope. So stand boldly in your story, knowing that God has turned your trials into triumphs. Share your testimony because through it, others will see the power of His love, the beauty of His grace, and the strength of His promises.